In a small town, everyone knows your business, but they don't always invite you to know Jesus. Can't say that on Christian radio. I'm Therese Main.
I'm Jesse Gabel. We host an afternoon radio show on family life, and there's some things that are easier to talk about on a podcast than they are on Christian radio, and one of them is growing up in a small town, which both of us did years apart from each other because
and geographically very much apart from
very far apart. I grew up in a tiny town called Gowanda. It's about 45 minutes south of Buffalo, and 90% of the people I mention the name to go like, "Oh, Rwanda? Oh, Tonawanda? What? I've never heard of that before." So if you have, points to you, love you, we'd be great friends.
I grew up in Dryden, which is known as the place between Cortland and Ithaca, and sounds a lot like DeRider, which I remember when I would wait for school to be closed on the radio. DeRider closed all the time, but Dryden closed not ever, ever.
Oh.
And so it was always like a Rider. And so growing up in a small town, I don't know if this was true in Gowanda, but in Dryden, the steeples outnumber the stoplights. Like, there were churches all over the place. Yeah. There were brick churches and white churches and trendy churches. And yet somehow I grew up never encountering Jesus. And I mean, I knew about God. I even had a Bible that I tried to read. That's a part of my testimony. Like, I tried to read this Bible all the time, but I started in Genesis, and well, you know, it's kind of hard.
It's a little bit difficult getting through.
Right. And no one invited me into faith. In a town full of churches, I somehow slipped through the cracks. And I remember after school, some kids would go across the street from our elementary school to this thing called religious ed. No, it's not a guy named Ed. It was religious education
religious
class.
Ed would teach us everything we needed to know.
No, it was some sort of like after school club. And the thing was, I would go home as a latchkey kid, and how much better would it have been for me to be learning about Jesus instead of sitting home alone? Proximity to church does not equal proximity to Christ. Mm-hmm. I think one thing that people in small towns assume is that everybody already knows. Everyone knows God. Everyone knows church. But assumption is the enemy of evangelism.
Yeah.
Faith is not gained by proximity. How can they call on the one they have not believed in? How can they believe in the one in whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? That is Romans 10:14. And Jesus never assumed. He invited. He noticed people who were overlooked. And I didn't need a big sermon growing up, but I did need someone to see me as worthy of Christ and just to invite me in.
Yeah, in Gowanda, I wouldn't say the steeples outnumbered the stoplight. Well, actually, it is Gowanda. There's not a lot of stoplights. So maybe they did. There were quite a few churches, and I was in church, for about as long as I can remember in Gowanda. My dad is a pastor, but he only became one when I was 12 or 13. But before then, he was kind of already doing a lot of pastor things. We owned a toy store in town, and so he got to meet every parent that lived
not just a toy store.
We can gloss over the name of the toy store.
You have to share the name of the toy store.
It was Jesse's Toy Box.
It was named after you. You literally grew up having a toy store named after you. How cool is that?
It's actually still there. It's Jesse's Home and Gifts now. It's owned by different people. But that's besides the point.
It was like a place of ministry almost.
It literally was. My dad got to know so many people in town who came in to buy things for their kids or for their grandkids. He got to know kids also who would come in to buy candy or steal candy. And he got to share the gospel with so many people that way, so that by the time he became a pastor in one of the churches in Gowanda, like everybody in town already knew him. And to this day, you drive anywhere in Gowanda with my dad, he can go, "Oh, there's Reggie. Oh, yeah, there's Paul riding his bike. Oh, yeah, there's Tom down there." He knows everyone. And so getting to see my dad kind of, I don't know, be as known in the community and as respected by so many people as he was and is, it was a really, really cool thing to see.
Small town faith can look really big. And I think it's because in small towns, like, your life is no secret. People know where you shop. They know how you tip. They know how you talk to your kids. they know all about you. And so there's a great opportunity to shine. And Jesus says, let your light shine before others so that they can see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. That's Matthew 5:16. And people may never read the Bible. I never got past Genesis as a kid, but they're reading you. And in small towns, I think they're reading you with a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They're seeing real faith in action. And that may be why your dad's ministry is so powerful, because I'm sure your dad was not perfect in all of his interactions with people at the toy store, but they got to see a real man of God and how he does business and conducts himself. And I think if someone had introduced me to Jesus growing up, my story might have started a little bit sooner. Obviously God has a purpose and a plan, and he used it for his glory. But man, there's a part of me that wishes that I grew up in the church, knowing Jesus, having that foundation of my faith locked in so much earlier. Church is not a closed circle. And I think this is one of the downfalls potentially of small town churches, is that they do become these little cliques on the corner, not because they're unloving, but because they're comfortable.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll have generations after generations who are members of the same church. They have their pew, their seat. No one else sits there. Everyone knows the songs. Everyone knows the flow. Everyone knows where they park. And Jesus had this tenderness for outsiders, even religious outsiders. He says it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. For I've not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. That's in Matthew 9. And that means churches have to be asking, whether you're in a big town or a small town, who is not here? Who doesn't feel invited? And who might assume that this church isn't for them? And invite those people to come sit in the pews. But I think in small towns, we have to get over ourselves a little bit and not assume things about people when it comes to faith, because God can do incredible works if we just get out of the comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, you can't do all of the churchy stuff exclusively at church. You have to bring that attitude of, I want to minister to people, I want to save people, I want to evangelize to people. You got to bring that outside the church doors. There's this great theme that I love that Tolkien brings into Lord of the Rings. It's this idea that it's not necessarily the mighty white knight good guys that swoop in and save the day from evil. It's the small, ordinary acts of kindness of just everyday common people that can make the world a better place. And I think that's so true for us as Christians. Like, it's not the superheroes that God uses. Sometimes it's the little people. And if it's just you in your small town, in your small church, and you can minister to people outside of those walls, invite somebody you don't know to church, invite a neighbor, meet somebody in the toy store, whatever it is. God can use you anywhere. And I think in a small town, like you said, there's a potential for the church to become kind of a clique. And man, if you can be the little break in the dam that lets people in, God can use you immensely. I think the small town is the perfect battleground for a Christian looking to change the world, starting small.
Inside small towns where you've got a lot of churches, we have to start to break down the walls between the churches. That if we fundamentally share that truth that Jesus was born to save people from their sins, then we're going to have a lot more agreement and we can work together to serve that town. Wouldn't it be amazing to have small towns all across PA and New York just become these beacons of the gospel, places where people are loving and kind and they serve one another and they're charitable, because small churches in small towns have begun to tap into the power of a mighty God.
Yeah.
That's when we get to see miracles happen. And I think revival can start small. And there's a lot of power in small towns. Yeah, it's a little bit annoying how everybody knows your biz all the time. But at the same time, if you know Jesus, make sure you don't just know people's business. Make sure that they know your Savior too.
Yes, yeah. Well, you can't even count out the small town that you live in as being like insignificant. There are more small towns in our country than there are big towns in our country. And you know what's fun? If you go on websites like Wikipedia and look at these small towns, they usually have a list of like famous people that were born in this town or came from this place.
Right.
You wouldn't believe it. Some of the most powerful people in the world or influential people, sports players, Olympic gold medal winners came from these tiny towns. You might be growing up. Your kids might be growing up alongside them right now. So yeah, start small, plant those seeds. We can't get the mentality that we need to go out and save the world. Sometimes you just need to start with the place you live, the people you know, the neighbors you have, because that has the potential to change the world starting from that tiny place.
Mighty oaks from little acorns grow.
Yeah.
And I think the same can be said from small towns. Mighty faith from small towns grow. We just have to be able to get outside the walls of the church and see people the way that Jesus saw people.
Can't say that on Christian radio. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, you could subscribe, maybe. And if you really liked it, you could always say so by making a gift to Family Life, the ministry this podcast is a part of. Just go to familylife.org and find out more about what we do.
Our producer is Josh Allen. How could we ever thank you enough? Did you know that Family Life offers a variety of podcasts? Get up to date with Family Life news, including the Noon Report and the 5 o'clock reports. There's If That Makes Sense, a conversation for Christians in their 20s. They're all free and on demand at familylife.org/podcast.